To improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often. Winston Churchill. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I am your host, Shamisa Ali. Our topic tonight is achievements in 2024 and plans for 2025, including challenges to gold, oil, bauxite, manganese, and forestry. The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the US, UK, Canada, the Caribbean, and Guyana. Funding support is by well known philanthropist Dave Narine from Dave West Indian Imports. Please welcome my moderator for tonight, Dr. Tara Singh.
Thank you very much,
And
Miss, and welcome to viewers.
good evening, Dr. Tara. Our panelist tonight is Professor Muniran Budu. And our
Hello,
guest
Jamil. Hello, Tara.
tonight is the Minister of Natural Resources, the Honorable Vickram Bharrat.
Thank
Good
you.
evening and welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Dr. Tara, please go ahead.
Yeah, hello, Minister. Thank you. We've been trying to get you a long time, so we are happy to have you just the day before budget. Before we ask you to do a brief review and the challenges for your ministry, there was an article in yesterday's paper where your ministry is working in collaboration with with a bauxite company. I believe that's in Bonisica area, right?
One is in Bonisica and one is in Linden.
Yeah, the collaboration that you have for training, that's the one in Bonisica or Linden?
No, that's a gold mining company.
Oh, gold mining.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's what we refer to as the G mine, G min,
Correct.
GMI.
That's correct.
Oh, that's gold mining. All right. Now, I know budget is tomorrow, so it's important that you talk a little about the achievements. We will not delve in the oil sector too much. Too much have been said about that, and it's mainly a regurgitation of information already out there. But we want to focus a little more on bauxite and manganese and gold. So if you talk a little about developments in the bauxite industry, what achievements you plan for this year and probably beyond for the bauxite in terms of greater production and probably the introduction of the alumina plant again in joint venture with Guyana and Suriname. So please proceed with that.
Thank you, Dr. Tara. Let me say good evening to all our viewers and listeners, whether you're tuning in from Guyana or in New York. I'm happy once again to be on the program and to be able to share information with our, especially members of the diaspora. I know that there is a genuine interest in Guyana and what is happening in Guyana, especially since Budget 2025 was presented last Friday, the 17th of January. And tomorrow we are going to start the official budget debates, which will go for 5 days. And then following that, we will have 5 days of examination of the estimates or committee of supplies. Thereafter, the passage of the budget, and then our work starts on the implementation of what is considered to be the largest budget ever in the history of our country. It's about 20% increase from budget 2024 and about 300% increase from 2020 to 2025. So it shows development over the last 5 years, our term in office. It shows that there was a revival, a revitalization in almost all the productive sectors within the country, and that the economy is not dependent solely on the oil and gas sector. A mistake that has been made by many countries around the world, especially knowing the amount of revenue that is earned from oil and gas resources. So what we would have endeavored to do as a government is to ensure that we continue to incentivize, we continue to expand, and we continue to assist stakeholders across all the productive sectors. Today, we are seeing the results of that initiative led by His Excellency President Ali, our General Secretary, Dr. Bharrat, and the government to ensure that these sectors are revitalized, these sectors are supported by the government. Because if you look at the productive sectors, especially that for the ones under the Ministry of Natural Resources, and I'll give you an example. The forestry sector, for example, employs over 25,000 Guyanese. And these are Guyanese that are mostly in the hinterland, riverine communities or indigenous people mostly work in the forestry sector. At no point in time, even when our production of oil reaches 1.5 million barrels of oil per day, that the oil and gas sector may be able to employ 25,000 Guyanese because of the nature, the structure of the industry. It's more capital intensive rather than labor intensive. So it is equally important that we continue to work and expand these traditional sectors, especially since the indigenous people of our country, those who live in the riverine forest communities, depend on it. Mining, for example, also employs another 30,000 Guyanese, whether directly or indirectly. Um, and we're seeing expansion in that sector, and soon we will see more and more people gaining employment, training, and employment in the mining sector. And if I may start a little bit on the mining sector, and you mentioned Dr. Tara bauxite. And I would love to start with bauxite because bauxite is a success story for our government over the last few years. You would recall that when we took over government, bauxite production was at an all-time low, mainly because of Rusal being chased away by the previous administration, the APNU AFC government. Rusal was the Russian-owned company operating in the Araima area, that is within the Kokwani, the Borbis area, and they were producing way more than Bosai at that point in time. We all know that the matter between the company and the workers were handled badly by the APNU AFC administration, thereby forcing the company out. Almost 1,000 people lost their jobs in that area. Daichuni, Kokwani, Borbis River communities, as well as New Amsterdam, because there was a transshipment point at the mouth of the Borbis River. And Orlandaf, I think is a German company, was operating, doing the transshipment of bauxite from the mines to the Borbis River mouth. So there were a number of people from New Amsterdam, Kanji area that also lost their jobs, because sometimes when we speak of Rousseau, we only think of the Borbis River, Kokwani, Aichuni, Linden. But New Amsterdam was severely affected as well because of the closure of Rousseau. And also the lack of investment by Bosai in the Linden operation, and also the Bonasica operation, as you mentioned, which is forest bauxite, as we call it. However, because of the confidence that companies, international investors now have in the government and country, we have seen a massive investment by Bosai in the Linden operation. So much so that our production has increased from 2023 to 2024 by 225%. That has never happened in the history of our country. We have moved from below 500,000 tons of bauxite in 2023 to over 1.7 million tons of bauxite in 2024, creating almost 500 new jobs alone in 2024. In 2024, we're expecting that the other bauxite company, which is in the Bonasica area, the Demerara River, that in 2025 their production too will be significantly improved, having done a significant amount of stripping and recapitalization in 2024. We will definitely see an increase in production in that company. However, Bauxite, which is in Linden, is poised to produce 4 million tons of bauxite in 2025. This is something that has never happened in the history of our country, going back to way back in the days when bauxite and sugar were our main exports. The production was never that high. But in 2025, we will see an increase in production to over 4 million tons of bauxite. This is mainly because of the investment by the company, definitely showing confidence in the economy, in the country, and in the government, and investing in Panamax vessel so that more or larger quantity of bauxite can be shipped from Guyana to wherever the market is, mainly in Asia and Europe. So I'm very happy with the development and investment in the bauxite industry. At one point in time, and you would know because you've been around a while, Dr. Tara, you know that in Linden we were struggling to create employment for the people of Linden and Region 10. Today is quite the opposite because the company has mentioned to me that they're now looking for workers, mainly because of the increase in economic activities in Region 10 in Linden, the expansion of the bauxite company, the logging sector, because Region 10 is one of the main producer of logs and wood products in Guyana. So we have seen an increase, a tremendous increase of economic activities in that region. So much so that the company is now looking for workers and to train and to work in the operation, the expanded operation. So bauxite is a success story, and I'm sure at the end of 2025 we'll be able to report all the positives that will be experienced. If I may move over to gold. As you know,
Just
gold.
before you go, excuse me, Minister, can you talk a little about the alumina plant?
Okay, sure. So what was the original arrangement between the government of Guyana and Bauxite, the bauxite company that took over the Lin mine operation in Linden, is that at some point in time they must move towards the establishment of an alumina refinery in Region 10, which will obviously create more job opportunities and also allow Guyana to export a process a processed product rather than the raw ore, which is something that we have been gearing towards, and we've been speaking with stakeholders to ensure that we move towards value added, move towards downstream processing, because that has been a main challenge for us, especially in natural resources sector, because we have always exported primary products and not really move significantly into downstream processing and value added products, which obviously is where the opportunities are for increase in revenue and job and private sector opportunities as well too. So that is the shift that we're working with now, to move companies in a direction of adding value to products and not just to export raw materials or primary products. So we have been engaged in the company. I can tell you only recently I was in a meeting with His Excellency and executives from the company. And the President Ali made it very clear to them that that is a direction in which we will want to go as a country, to have an alumina plant in country at some point in time. You would understand too that the main challenge why we have not moved forward with this as yet, or why the company has not invested in it as yet, is mainly because of power generation, the cost of power generation, and the reliability of power generation as well too, because an alumina plant will require a significant amount of power or steam.
Mm.
So that has always been a hindrance to us moving to value added or downstream
Mhm.
processing. You ask any stakeholder in any sector, they will tell
Okay.
you that it's one of the biggest hindrance in
So
manufacturing, in the logging
there was,
sector, sawmilling, in site
Mhm.
industry, it's the
but
same.
there was
So
an
we're
alumina
hoping
plant.
that at some
Minister, there was an aluminum plant which was closed down, I believe, in 1982 at Linden. So, are you going to rehabilitate that plant, or that is completely disintegrated?
No, that is totally disintegrated by now. I
Mhm.
think I've been there a few
And,
years
and,
back, and
and
I don't see any possibility of
all right.
rehabilitating
And
the whole plant. And
before
then
I think
you would
before you
understand
move
too
on,
that a lot has changed
excuse me,
from then
before
to
you move
now.
on, I would like Professor Buru to raise some issue with bauxite. But just tell us, is there any hope that the Rusal bauxite Arorima at Kokani area actually you can restore that even to a Guyanese company or give it to the Bozai or the other company at Bonisica? Is that on the works? Is that there any consideration about that?
That is a very good question, Doc. What happened is that the company has an active license because what we would normally do in the mining sector, especially large scale investment, is that we issue a license for the mine life of that particular project. So if it's 10 years mine life, we issue a license for that mine life of the project. So the license for Rusal is actually still active. We when we started out in 2020, we sought to engage the company. I personally had a few engagement with them, and then, as you're aware, the war in Ukraine started, and I think focus shifted a lot by Russian.
Mhm.
So I can say that since then we have not re-engaged the company, but hopefully once the if the war should be over and everything goes back to normal, then maybe we will look at taking further steps. But as it is now, we have not taken any step mainly because of that, and that the license is still active. I know that there was some amount of conversation between um, Bosai and the Russell, but I don't think anything would have been realized from those conversations as
Oh,
yet.
all right. Thank you, Minister. Professor Buru.
Yeah, Minister, good to see you again. Uh, Guyana exports its bauxite, as you indicated. Are the materials above the bauxite deposit, the overburden, so to speak, also exported? And if so, is the royalty lower than the bauxite ore?
Yes, the ore is exported. The ore is exported. What happened with bauxite to Professor, and I think you would know, is that bauxite would have suffered a bit, especially with the price in the world market. And Australia and Guinea, I think Guinea in Africa is one of the main producer in the world. So because they were basically absorbing the demand around the world, Guinea and Australia, two biggest producers of bauxite, the price in the world market, like manganese right now, there's an issue with the price with manganese in the world market right now. So that was a bit of a setback for the industry. But luckily, because of the investment and because mainly Bosai, I think Bosai are one of the largest aluminum plant in China. So they're basically transporting, exporting the ore directly or mainly to their plant in in China. I would say the royalties is the agreement has with the government is one that encourages any investor to invest in the country. Um, and our policies have always been to provide incentives wherever necessary, and to support investment in the country.
What is that royalty? What percentage the government gets?
I would have to get the based on the exports, Professor. Maybe on another show I'll get the figures as to the royalties collected from each company by year. But
Mhm.
I can endeavor to provide that for you. But I'm sorry, I don't have the
Okay.
actual figures here with me right now, and I don't want
Yeah.
to be misquoted or misguided.
No. one of the things I think you missed in my question too is you have the bauxite ore, but there's a lot of overburden. You got over 50 feet of overburden and more. Are the overburden also exported?
No, no. What has happened now with the overburden, because of the massive development that is taking place across the country and the great demand for the silica sand and loam,
Hmm.
that we've been encouraging the company to work with local contractors, with local stakeholders to have that overburden material removed and utilized elsewhere. For example, the silica sand, you will know linden is
Mhm.
basically white sand, as we call it, or silica sand.
Mhm.
So we're using that in the construction. Loom is in high demand now because of the amount of roads that we're building across the country. So the overburden is not exported, but we are encouraging the company to work with the local contractors and stakeholders to utilize it in the
Mhm.
expansion boom that is ongoing.
Now, do you know if rare earth materials are present in the bauxite overburden and tailings?
Now that has always been a question as I've been asked by a number of people. But to date, the two operation, there is no sign of rare earths. Um, Based on our geology, I don't believe the Linden area is there is any sign of rare earths. Neither the
Mm.
Damara River where Bonsica or where the Forest Bauxite Company is operating. It will be more inland. There are traces in maybe the mountainous areas mostly, but not these areas that is so close to the coast, based on the
Mm.
geology.
Yeah. But let me give you some information. I was consulted a few years ago to review some test results for the presence of rare earth materials in bauxite tailings and residues in the Linden area. Now, rare earth materials were indeed present, but I cannot disclose to you if they are in commercial quantities. So, as a
Yeah.
suggestion, I would request that you consider that seriously and investigate whether rare earth materials are present because the cost now for rare earth materials. It's much, much more than bauxite ore.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it depends on what type is present, and as you rightly mentioned, whether it's commercial quantity or not.
Mhm.
Maybe they're traces, but they're not commercial quantities. We have
Okay.
not had any reports of any commercial quantity in those two areas, especially.
Yeah. But I could tell you for certain that there are several rare earth materials present in some of these tailings ponds in there. But as I said, I cannot tell you, I
Yeah.
cannot disclose that information's commercial viability. Tara, shall I continue? Because I have some questions
No,
on gold
no.
and diamond.
If you have any other question in the box, then we can move on to forestry, then to gold.
All right, go ahead. No,
All
go
right.
ahead with
Okay.
the gold and
Minister,
diamond.
please proceed with the forestry sector and what challenges you have and how that is in sync with the LCD. Yes.
All right. So the forestry sector, well, we know what was the state of the forestry sector in 2020. The forestry sector was bankrupt. We would have managed to turn that around, so much so that we have seen an increase in production from 2021 right up to 2024. Last year, for example, we had an increase of 4.6, our growth of so 4.6% in the forestry sector. I mentioned earlier too, the forestry sector employs over 25,000 people, whether directly or indirectly. And it is important too because most of our indigenous communities are engaged in some form of forestry activities. We have about 65 forestry organizations. Um, that is a total of maybe about 3,000 people, mainly young people and women, and these organizations are mostly in the riverine areas, areas in the Kukwani area, the Borbis River, Aichuni, some in Region 1, some in Region 2. So that is why I mentioned it is very important that we continue to work and build out the forestry sector. And I'm happy that you mentioned the low carbon development strategy because this is a strategy that is maybe second to none across the world when it comes to the preservation of our forests, when it comes to showing how we can balance economic development with environmental sustainability. And I think that is a model that Guyana should be used as an example for. Not many countries can actually develop that kind of model that we have right now, where there is significant economic development. We continue to explore and produce natural resources in a sustainable manner, while at the same time we maintain our high environmental credentials and keep our forests intact. So much so that we have one of the lowest deforestation rate in the world. In our low carbon development strategy, we made a commitment to keep deforestation rate at 0.07%. We are way below that right now. We are probably we have the lowest deforestation rate among forested countries, one of the lowest deforestation rate among forested countries around the world now. We are probably the only country, I think we are the only country, as a matter of fact, that would have signed the Forest Partnership Agreement with the European Union. We would have signed the Voluntary Partnership Agreement with the European Union. We're hoping that we will be the second country in the world to be FLET certified through the EU, bringing a process whereby our timber, there is proper traceability and accountability in the sector, ensuring the legality of wood and wood products, and our forest is PEFC certified again too, which speaks towards sustainability. In logging activities in Guyana, I'm happy to say that there is no form of clear felling. While we do logging, we do it in a selective manner. There is a forest inventory done. The Forestry Commission work with the stakeholder to determine how many cubic will be harvested in a given area, what species, what diameter of tree. So it is done in a very controlled manner. That is what we meant when we said that we're going to continue logging activities, but in a sustainable and a responsible manner. Our objective, as I mentioned earlier too, is to move towards value added. Already we are working with the EU in building out small furniture shops in communities like Ituni. We have done that already. Ituni community is now making school furniture. They're making desks and other furniture for the RDC in Region 10. We want to do similar models in Kukwani, in Oriala Sepruta, in Region 2, in Limasan. We're developing similar models in those communities, because the idea is to move away from or minimize the exploitation of wrong wood or logs, rather to export finished products, furniture. And I'm happy to say that we have the Juravilla housing development, which probably you heard of, where we are building these prefab homes with mostly wood that we will call the lesser used or the lesser known species, because we are Guyanese, and you know that when you go to the lumberyard or sawmill, you either want greenheart, or you want kabakali, or you want silver bali. There are just a few species that we know and we use. But there's so many other species in Guyana that is as good as these wood that we use, or the ones that we know. So we are promoting those lesser used species or the lesser known species, which is of good quality. And we are building these prefab homes. The company is supplying homes to Barbados, I think St. Vincent, and they're working with a few other countries to export these prefab homes. That has really boosted the forestry sector in terms of adding value to our products. We now have a small group that is working on coals production. In the past, we just had one size bag of coals, and it's usually in what we call in Guyana rice bag. And whether you want a small amount or a large amount, you got to buy the one bag, and it is not properly packaged. We have moved away from that. I'm happy to say that there's a company now that we have nicely packaged coals of different sizes that are in the supermarkets. We are looking at how do we utilize wood waste. because as you know, our recovery rate in the industry is about 50 to 60%. So every log we get 50% out of it. So we are looking at one, increasing recovery rate, and two, how do we utilize that wood waste? I know in the US you use mulch, I think you call it mulch, to keep down the weeds or the grass. That is something that we can produce here and export to the US and any other country. In some countries, they use the wood waste to generate electricity. So we are looking at different options as to how we will utilize the wood waste other than just burning it, which is not ideal, or leaving it to rot. It simply means that it will increase the profitability of the stakeholders in the sector. We have seen too, because of the revolving fund which was established with $900 million, a number of sawmills have been established. In 2024, for example, we we had 25 new sawmills starting to operate. We had 13 new lumber yards across the country, mainly because, again, we had the fund available and because of the demand locally. The demand has increased significantly because of the construction ongoing through government spending and through investment in the private sector too. So all in all, I think the forestry sector is on better footing now, 4 years after. I think the forestry sector is on better footing, not only in terms of the economic activity derived from it, but also the preservation of our forests, keeping our forests standing, ensuring that we maintain our high environmental credentials, and at the same time to look at the forest economy, look at alternative economic activity that can be carried out in the forest other than logging. And there are many. Through the present initiative, we have started a honey production, and this has really taken off with a number of small organizations in those communities that are now venturing into honey production. And of course, there's a big market for honey worldwide. So we are looking at what other economic activities can be generated in the forest other than just cutting trees. So
Yeah,
in
yeah.
2025, that is the main challenge now, to look
Mhm.
at the forest economy and develop economic alternative economic opportunities in the sector.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just want to know with the wood waste that you talk about over 50%, you plan to hire a consultant or you already hire a consultant to do feasibility study into what alternative uses the wood waste can be
We
applied,
we
whether it's to
we
generate
had a, we
electricity.
had we had a number of consultants who would have looked at it, prepare reports, but we have been working very closely with the EU and the UK on how do we improve the forestry sector, how do we have greater accountability in the sector, how do we improve the viability of the sector. So with the EU and the UK, we have been doing a lot of work, especially in this area. But it calls too for recapitalization by stakeholders. Um, you would find that some of the sawmills, they really need to upgrade and update the equipment that they use, so that the recovery rate can be increased. And that is one of the as one of the issue that was raised with His Excellency when he decided we are going to start the revolving fund so that there is access to capital to retool in sawmills that have been established years now but really need new equipment.
No,
So the
now for
idea
the,
first and foremost is to increase the recovery rate,
mhm.
then to
the
look at how
the
do we
idea
account.
of having value-added products, that is a great idea, but how do you encourage more people to be engaged in value-added? Do you give them any incentives, tax holidays, or what?
The big incentive, I can tell you that the big incentive, there's a lot of people who wanted to venture into value added because the market is there, the opportunity is there, and it is very viable. For example, if you export one log, and I'm just giving an example, don't hold me to the figure. If you get $10 by exporting one log, you convert that log to boards or lumber, you would get about $20. If you convert that lumber wood boards into furniture, you probably get about $50. So it is very feasible for stakeholders to invest in the sector. But what has been the biggest hindrance, again, just like the bauxite industry, is power generation. And the last time I was on the program, I think I spent a lot of time speaking about the gas energy project, right? And you would have seen reports recently that we have the loan from the US Exim Bank has been approved, and that project is moving ahead at pace for completion in 2025. Upon completion, we will reduce electricity costs by 50%. So I think that is the biggest incentive that will incentivize not only the forestry sector, but all sectors throughout the entire country.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Professor Boudou?
Uh, Minister, what you said about the forestry section is very commendable. Do you have a policy to encourage Guyanese to use more wood in, say, housing and in commercial structures?
There is a policy, but again, what we try to encourage too is to utilize, well, the utilization of local products. That is the first thing. What we would have done to protect the local wood industry too is the importation of the pine wood, the pitch pine wood, the pine doors and all that, the sheet rocks. It attract a very high tariff on it. So basically, we are giving the advantage to local producers. So if your Barama, for example, is producing plywood, they would have the advantage because the sheetrock obviously attracts a higher tariff on it. The local producer of doors and woods and windows, cupboards, they obviously they have an advantage because the pine wood attract a higher tariff as well too. So we have been ensuring that we provide enough incentives and encouragement to investors to utilize local products mainly. But to have an overall policy, I think we may have to work on developing that and ensuring that once we develop it too, that is implemented throughout the sector.
Yeah, because there's tremendous advantage apart from Guyana having this large forest of using wood in these types of construction I mentioned. For example, Denmark, right, is the number one user of wood. You see, in the building construction, and I did some research in in early 70s, right, on using this lesser species of wood for Guyana. There's tremendous advantage in using those wood. They are superior to anything that we have in North America here. But you see, to do that also, you need to have standardization. Do you have standardization?
Well, I think that is something. When I said that we'll have to work on a policy, I think that is something that will definitely have to be a part of that policy. Because what has happened is that in some countries, for example, where they don't have alternative, like for example, Trinidad. Trinidad don't have wood as an alternative. They don't have timber. So most of their homes are either steel or concrete. We have options in Guyana. And you find that people usually go with options that can suit their lifestyle or their earnings. And it's something that we have not discouraged. We want to leave it open to have people must have a choice based on their income and how much they can spend too. Some people can afford a concrete home, some people can afford a timber home. But I understand the point. Some countries having a timber home is like a luxury, especially in Europe, right? Having a timber home in some countries is like it's a luxury.
Yeah.
So,
Minister, you mentioned Trinidad. Trinidad usually doesn't have timber, but they have cement. In Guyana, we don't have cement. We have timber. So it's the obvious conclusion.
no,
right?
I get your point, but we have silica sand, so it helps.
Yeah, but you have sand. Cement is more expensive. You see, concrete, but you have to get a stone, which is in the interior area. So uh,
I think it's
I
more
know
it's
we
more
ha-
to the choice is more to the
yeah,
choice of people.
yeah.
We
But I
provide.
think you need education to let people know, right? Because environmentally, timber is better and it's much more suitable for Guyana because the soils in Guyana are very soft, right? Timber will get reduced foundation costs. So there's a lot of reasons. I don't want to go into the technical details here, but I just want to indicate whether you do have
You
a
know,
policy.
the average Guyanese will say that the maintenance cost might be less
Mhm.
with
Well,
concrete or with
that's not
steel.
again, it's education. That's not quite true.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we leave that for another time
Yeah.
and another
So
discussion. So, Tara, you want to go ahead
it's
because I know there's
debatable, and
more
that's why
areas you want
we
to talk
leave it.
about.
We give an option. We leave it as an option.
Yeah,
So
I know
it's
Tara, you
based
have several
on
topics here today.
individuals.
You have gold and
Yes.
diamonds. Could you
Yeah,
go ahead with that?
yeah, Minister. Thank you, Professor Boudou. Yeah, if you can talk a little about the gold industry and what progress you're making there and what are your big plans.
Okay.
If you can address the question of smuggling, that's a huge problem, challenge for the government.
We go gold has always been one of our main export. Gold has actually kept our economy floating for a very, very long time. But unfortunately, we have seen over the years a decline in production. I think 2016 we had the highest production, mainly because the Aurora gold mine and Troy Resources would have started to produce them. Troy would have entered in, I think they would have started building out their mine sometime in 2012, 2013. Aurora maybe a year or two before that. So they started producing around 2014, 2015, 2016. Those are the two those were the two large scale gold producing companies in Guyana. So we saw a steep increase in gold production up to 2016. And then we started to see a decline after 2016 right up to 2023. We saw a decline every single year, mainly because Troy Resources, they basically went out of operation. COVID took a hard hit on them. Actually, the CEO for the company in Guyana here died due to COVID. Almost the entire the camp or the workforce had COVID. So they basically closed down after that. They had decline in production prior to that too. Aurora Gold Mine, they were doing open pit mining, and open pit mining can only give you so much for so long. So we would have seen a decline in gold production. What we have seen in 2024 is we have started to see an increase again in gold production. We have seen an increase of thousand, over 2,000 ounces of gold from 2023 to 2024. Even though it's a small increase, it shows a revival in the gold industry. The gold industry also took a hit because some of the main Guyanese medium scale miners, because of other economic opportunities in Guyana now, stem from the oil and gas industry and the influx of investors and tourists and economic activities in Guyana. We would have seen many of them moving away from the sector, going into construction, some into the hotel industry. We have seen them going into the shore-based company, and I think I can mention it safely because the fact the Alfonso family, for example, is one of the largest gold miner in Guyana, medium scale miner. They now, even though they are in mining, they are part of the Vickram shore-based company, which is opening on Saturday. They're part of the hotel industry. They're building a new hotel. They're going into the airline industry, which is good because it shows that there are opportunities and they're diversifying. So we are encouraging that. It's not a problem for us as a government. But I'm just using that to show you an example that because of the other economic opportunities that are available, many people would have left the sector or uh, decrease the size of the operation Also, we have seen a severe shortage of labor in the gold sector. And I'll give you another example. Someone from Borbis, for example, in 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there weren't many opportunities on the coast or in Borbis or in Josham for employment for some people. So what they did is that they would have gone and worked with the mining companies in the interior. But leaving, going and work in the gold bush, as we commonly call it, or the interior, means leaving your family on the coast, staying in the interior maybe for 4 or 6 weeks, being exposed to whatever challenges you have there. So now, because there are opportunities on the coast, you find those individuals, they have moved away. And obviously, it's natural that they would prefer to be on the coast with their family and in the comfort of their own home, once they can be gainfully employed and also earning similar salaries or close to what they've been earning in the gold sector. So all these are challenges added with the weather pattern, and we know climate change is real. It's something that we can um, deny anymore. And we have seen that over the last few years. Like in 2021, I went into the Mazaruni River. The water, we had water like 15, 20 feet above the normal height. In 2022, we had a severe dry period. There was no water for miners. So climate change is real, and it did take a hit on the mining sector, for example, because without water, you can't really function in the mining sector. Without rainfall and some of the rivers, water in the rivers being low, you can't access some of the areas. For example, going into the Mazaruni River during the dry season is a challenge. The Cayuni River in dry season is a big challenge for miners. So these are factors that would have played a big part in the sector, in the decline in the production over the last few years. But we have seen, as I mentioned, a small revival, which we expect to continue in 2025. One, mainly because the Aurora gold mine, we now have our forest underground gold mine in Guyana. That is the Aurora gold mine, and their production would have increased in 2024, and we will see yet another increase in 2025. We have seen, because of the infrastructure, the amount of money spent by the government on building out infrastructure so that we can access new land. Because another challenge too is that the land that are being worked or mining is ongoing on are lands that have been worked on for decades. There's some land that people have been working for 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, 30 years, as a matter of fact, because those are the lands that are close by, those are the lands that are accessible. So, what we have done now is to open up some new areas by providing necessary infrastructure, upgrading some, like the Peruni road. We have upgraded that road. So we have seen more and more people going into those new areas, which obviously would yield higher production. So definitely we're looking forward for increased production in 2025. Our projection is to achieve
What,
the 100,000 mark in 2025.
what about the idea of smuggling?
So with regard to smuggling, we had some amount of success in 2024. I'm not sure if you saw it, but there were a number of persons who were held up at the airport and other parts of Guyana, um, seemingly in being indulging in smuggling of gold. We know the one at the airport, 200 and something ounces. I think it was 207 ounces that they were actually leaving on a flight from Guyana to the US with. So we have seen some amount of success in curbing the the pilfering. But what we are doing from GGMC or the Ministry of Natural Resources point of view is ensure that our monitoring and checks intensify. What we normally do is that all miners or mining camp, they would have what we call a production book. So they will have to enter the weekly production. Now, what we are going to ensure that we do now is to, once we check that production book this week, next week or the other week when we visit that camp again, we must see a receipt to correspond with that production and to show that the gold has been sold to a legitimate buyer, because we have a few legitimate buyers in Guyana. We have the Guyana Gold Board, which have seen an increase in purchases in 2024, which is a good sign. We have seen also the dealers, that is the companies that can export gold from Guyana. We only have five. And then we have what we call traders. Those traders are Guyanese who are licensed by GGMC to buy gold, but not to export gold. So it will call for obviously better monitoring. Um, there is a unit that is also has been set up by His Excellency to investigate any info or on any lead or information that we receive. They have been actively pursuing those leads, and we are hoping that we will get more success in 2025. But it's something that we're definitely and actively engaging on. Unfortunately, and you will know for obvious reasons, I cannot divulge more information as to some of the operation that is ongoing. But I can tell you that is something that is definitely attracting the attention of the
All
government.
right.
It's very
We run out of time, but before I pass you on to Professor Boudou for the final section, I just want you to offer a few comments on the not much known is about the manganese, and that's an important mineral that's being produced by Guyana. If you can talk a little, and then Professor Boudou will make his concluding remarks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Quickly, we started to produce manganese 2 years ago. After I think it's 50 years. After 50 years, we started to produce manganese once again. What is more important for us is that the production of manganese is done in the Matthews Ridge Region 1 area. And because of that, it has created a number of employment in that area. We now have close to 200 persons working with the manganese company. Besides from that, the economic activities and the spin-offs, that is the provision of services and goods to the company by locals in that area. So I'm particularly pleased that the people of Region 1, especially the Matthews Ridge Arakaka area, have been able to benefit from that investment. While the country has benefited from production of manganese, I think importantly, Region 1 would have benefited significantly. Also, improvement in infrastructure, roadways, and all that. Port facility, which was done by the company, that has helped economic activity significantly in the Port Kaituma, Matthews Ridge, Arakaka sub-district in Region 1. But as I mentioned earlier, the manganese price in the world market is not that favorable, even though there isn't much competition around the world. I think it's only Guyana in this part of the world, and in Africa there is a big deposit. But we'll continue to work with the company. Their production has increased. However, because of the market price, we haven't seen a large expectation or export in 2024. But in 2025, we expect definitely, once a recovery in price, a large export share of it.
Okay, Professor Boudou.
Yeah. Minister, I know we have a time constraint, but I'm going to rattle off then two questions for you, and if you could briefly answer them. Do you have knowledgeable ethical inspectors monitoring gold and diamond production around the clock? And if there are shortcomings, how are you addressing it? The second issue is, in the early 1970s, I worked on the feasibility study for the Tibuku hydroelectric project in the Mazaruni River. I saw amphibious aircraft collecting gold and diamond from local miners almost daily with no government inspection in sight. Do you think this is still happening? And how much gold and diamond do you think are unreported and or smuggled? Go ahead.
All right. So on the first question, monitoring the interior regions, and you mentioned that you have experience in the sector. You have visited some of these areas, so you know the challenges that exist
Mhm.
in those areas in the interior regions. So monitoring is will always be a challenge for us.
Mhm.
What we have done though is to have greater collaboration between the Guyana Forestry Commission and the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission.
Mhm.
Put the two together, we have over 50 field stations in the interior regions with almost 500 staff on a rotation basis. But you and I would know that you can put 1,000 staff, but it still won't be able to
Mhm.
adequately cover all the interior regions and locations where you have mining activities,
Mhm.
especially on a frequent basis. They'll be able to cover it, but not on a frequent basis. Some areas are still very difficult to access. So, what we intend to do, and we have started last year, is to incorporate the use of technology.
Mhm.
For example, we've acquired some drones already. We are looking at satellite imagery because that is the only way I think we can adequately monitor our
Mhm.
hinterland, especially the mining districts in Guyana. In terms of integrity, it comes down to the human factor. It comes down to the individual. I mean, we can train all our mines officers. We can pay them a good salary like we're doing right now. But at the bottom line is that it comes down to the individual, whether their integrity is important to them, whether their reputation and what their job entails is important to them. That is another story. But I we try to inculcate that kind of culture among our mines officers. That is why they well, I would say safely that they're well paid, and we expect them to carry out their job in an honest manner and to uphold the integrity. But you know how challenging that is.
Mhm.
This is goal we are speaking of, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we try to I want to say dive around the topic, and I want to say, are we saying Guyana beat around the bush? But
Mhm.
you gotta admit that it is a challenge, especially when it comes to people's integrity and how
Mhm.
well they can perform their job honestly. And it's not only in the gold industry; it happens anywhere in the
Mhm.
world. Not only Guyana either. It happens in all countries around the world. On the other question of uh,
Mhm.
illegal operation in interior, I think we would have. I know you spoke of the 80s.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, in 1982, I was only 2 years old. But I
Mhm.
can tell you now that we have not had in the recent past reports of these things happening in Guyana. So I can say safely, I don't think it is happening now because we have been monitoring the operation. At GGMC, we have the amount of dredge that are registered. We have the amount of excavators that's going to the interior. We keep track of all the airstrip around the country in collaboration with the Army too, civil aviation at the same time. But I know you spoke of amphibious
Mhm.
planes, but I don't think we have had any report recently of that. And to put a quantity to it, I know you're putting me in a
Mhm.
tough position to give you a figure, which I may
Mhm.
not be able to do because
Mhm.
if I had known that, I'll definitely be working towards stopping it.
All right.
Mhm.
Thank you, Minister. I think we got to bring the program to a close. I will now pass on to our host, Shamiza. I don't know if you have any questions for the minister from our viewers.
Thank you, Dr. Tara. We do have some questions and we have some suggestions as well from our viewers. I will first start off with Professor Budu. We have Mr. Kevin Hussein who is asking, Professor Budu, you mentioned rare earth elements. Based on what you can disclose, do you foresee Guyana being a country that can produce semiconductors if enough are found?
Yeah. And he answered the question himself, if enough is found, right? And we don't know that.
Okay.
Well, what we do have is some companies have shown interest in exploration,
Mhm.
prospecting that is. So to date, we don't have enough data to say that we have commercial quantity and we can move towards producing.
So this is from Mr. Jailal. He says the sugar industry once subsidized the bauxite industry when it needed help. Now that the situation is vice versa, would the bauxite industry reciprocate financially?
But I think you can see that in budget 2025. We have made a commitment that we will keep sugar alive. You've seen that through our commitment of the last 4 years. We have injected a lot of capital into reopening estates and retooling, and ensuring that we put people back to work. Basically, we have reopened the Rosal estate. We're working towards um, and enhancing the operation at Albion, at Iflot, at Blamont. We have the packaging factory also at Albion Estate. So we have done a lot to show that our intention is clear to keep sugar alive. Again, mainly because of the employment it creates in the Berbice area, because most of the estates are in the Berbice Region 5, Region 6. It's only IFLA that is in Region 3. Other than that, the three other estates is in Berbice, where employment, keeping this industry going for employment is important for our people. So the commitment is definitely there. And again, in 2025, there is a significant allocation for Gaisuku and to continue growing the sector back to where it should be.
Perfect, thank you. This is from Rajendra Singh. He says, last week, the Guyanese critic discovered a few heaps of abandoned logs in the interior. They were marked and apparently ready for export. What will become of these logs? Are they good for anything? Should the government give them away to citizens who may want to make something good out of them?
I actually saw that report, and most of those logs have been sitting there. I would say over 8 to 9 years. I think it was from the Baishanling operation. Unfortunately, that was one of the company that was forced out by the AP and UAFC administration, just like Russell too, and just like Barama gave up their concession. So I think that video was done in the concession that was once held by Baishanling. I don't know how useful it would be now. I've been there for about 8 9 years, but definitely we'll do an assessment, and if it can be used, I see no issue because we often help communities, especially indigenous communities, when they need infrastructure in their community. We help people if there's a fire and they need to build back their homes. In cases like that, we always help. So I see no reason why we won't if it can be used.
Okay. This question is from Ramona, and I'm sure it was in regards to something you were saying. Is this not going to have a backlash on the price of wood being used in Guyana for building purposes?
I I'm not sure where it stemmed from, but let me say that once we increase production, the demand has been growing for building material in Guyana, mainly because of what is happening in Guyana. But we have seen increase in production from 2021 right up to 2024. We have seen lesser exports in the sector and more local utilization. So as it is now, to date, I would safely say that we have been able to satisfy the local market and also to keep the price down. If we had focused more on exporting logs, which will obviously generate more revenue for the commission, then I think that would be detrimental for local consumers because they would have to pay a higher price and compete for the lower supply of timber in the local market. But we're taking the other approach whereby we must satisfy the local market for us and then focus on exports. So the main focus of the commission is not exports, I can tell you that. The main focus is to satisfy the local market and ensure there is enough supply.
And she also added that more studies should be made on the type of wood in Guyana I'm not that knowledgeable about wood in Guyana, but what about investigating wood such as tonka and other softwood in Guyana instead of pine?
I think I mentioned that too. It is because Guyanese have always used, I would say, about 5 to 6 species of wood. And we grew up hearing that you can go and buy Kabakali, Silver Valley, Green Heart is probably the best. But there's so many other species. We have probably about 1,000 different species of wood in our forest in Guyana. We have the species you can make the furniture, the big vines that can make these nice fancy furniture. We have one that you call Womara that gives you a wonderful finish, natural finish. There's so many different species, but it's just that we have never really promoted as much as we should have on the local market, which we're changing now through the housing project. And that now would put less strain on the species that are used a lot, like greenheart, for example. I mean, we don't have an abundant supply of greenheart, but we have kakarali, which is as good as greenheart. We have mora, which is as good as greenheart for marine and outdoor construction. So there are many other species that are as good as greenheart or purple heart or kabakali, but it's just because we are so comfortable using these species that we have continued to do so over the years. But I think it is our responsibility too to promote those lesser used species a lot more than we're doing right now.
Thank you. Now, Minister, I remember in the 90s when, like you said, Green Heart is one of those wood that there's a demand for it. But I remember in the 90s, for every Green Heart uh, timber that was, pulled down, they had to plant a tree back for that. Do we still have that happening in Guyana? And if so, how are we making sure that that's being done?
That's a very good question, Shamiz. I'm glad you asked it. You allow me to show what we're doing so far. I can tell you safely over the last 2 years, we have budgeted and spent almost $1 billion in reclamation and reforestation, especially in minute areas. We have a massive project ongoing in Region 10, that is in the bauxite, the minute area in the bauxite belt. We have one in Region 8, one in Region 1, one in Region 6, where we are doing a lot of reclamation and reforestation. It is a very expensive venture, but it is very much needed to ensure that we put back the greenery where it should be. We repair our forests as much as we could. And what we are looking at right now too is to look at the use of bamboo to do reforestation, because some countries have done it very successful. We had a team went to Ecuador recently, and Ecuador, for example, is a fantastic model of where they use bamboo to do reclamation. Well, bamboo is more grass, but it's fast growing. It grows fast, and then there's a number of economic use benefits from bamboo other than just planting back the forest and having greenery and carbon capture. We can also use bamboo for flooring, we can use it for furniture. So it creates some economic activities in communities as well too. And it grows back very fast. So we're looking at that using bamboo as one of the species in those minute areas. But I can tell you we have spent almost $1 billion to date over the last 2 to 3 years in reforestation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I would now like to ask you for your closing remarks.
All right, so let me thank you, Shamizu, for having me in the program. I know Dr. Tara has been behind me for a while now, but unfortunately, my father passed. I think tomorrow will make 2 months now, so it has been a difficult period for myself, for my family as well. So it's not that I don't want to be a part of the program. Professor Budu, I sense that you're very knowledgeable, especially with regards to our minerals and the interior regions. You're always welcome to visit. I'm not sure when last you visited Guyana, but you're always welcome to visit. And I want to say to our viewers that we appreciate your interest, especially those in diaspora. We appreciate your interest in Guyana, as President Ali would have mentioned. There's a place here for you. This is your home. Um, and Guyana is open. Guyana is, I would say, Guyana is the place to be now. This is the most exciting period in the history of our country. This is when we get to build out the new modern Guyana that all of us wanted. Thank you.
Thank you. Our condolences to you and your family.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know it's a difficult time for you, and I hope with time you'll be able to get through this.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Tara, we will
Yeah.
now conclude the program. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our panel, Professor Budu, our
Thank you, Minister.
moderator for tonight, Dr. Tara, and our guest, um, Mr. Vickram Bharrat, all of our viewers tonight for taking the time to be here. Until next time, I am your host, Shamisa Ali, and this is the Guyana Dialogue. Good evening,
Yeah.
everyone.
Good
Thank you.
evening. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. This program is very informative.